Okay, welcome back. So we begin by looking at how we identify the problem that we are interested in solving. Um, so first, we have to look at a very common problem in teams, which is the problem with brainstorming. Typical brainstorming happens in face-to-face setting with people just throwing out ideas, maybe a loose facilitation. Brainstorming tends to fail, though, under lots of situations, including some very common ones, where the first person with the loudest idea can tend to dominate the session. The first idea can tend to influence the rest of the discussion, something we call anchoring bias. Sometimes people are afraid of giving disruptive ideas. We call this a lack of psychological safety. And then often groups are good at producing lots of ideas, but are less good at how to prioritize or structure those ideas. So we're going to give a method here called affinity mapping of how we can do this in a fast, efficient, structured way. In order to use this method, we need to develop what we call a meta skill, meaning a skill we use in lots of different situations. And this is a skill called idea clustering. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to cluster, or in French, regrouper, lots of different ideas. So basically, the art of idea clustering is choosing categories, creating a set of categories, a small, reasonable number of categories that all of the ideas can fit into. Idea clustering is what allows you to move from a divergent phase of problem solving, where you're coming up with potential solutions or coming up with potential perspectives on the problem, to a convergent phase where you're analyzing or prioritizing. So how do we do this? How do we create category sets? There are two kind of traditional methods from history of philosophy and science going back to Aristotle. One, the taxonomy, which is creating a set of categories from data we observe. So we say, okay, some of these four-footed animals have stripes, some of them don't have stripes, and some of them have really long necks. Okay, so then we can create these three categories: zebras, horses, and giraffes. Another way of creating categories is from using our own logical reasoning about using models of things we know about the world. Like we know, for example, the roles within a company include HR, finance, and strategy. And so we can use that typology of strategy, HR, finance, and see if that covers all of the ideas we want to cluster. The one important rule in idea clustering is we call MISI. MISI is an acronym meaning mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. What does that mean? It means that categories first do not overlap. That means they're mutually exclusive. We don't want an idea to fit in multiple categories. And no obvious categories are missing, meaning you see down here, if there are three big topics we need to cover, we want to make sure that all three of them are there in our list somehow. This is really important, especially when you're designing like multiple choice answers to a survey question, or when you are designing a deliberative process where you really need to make sure you choose from all possible options, and those options are mutually exclusive. And even when it's not, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like when you're just trying to move from a divergent to a convergent step in a brainstorm, it can still be a helpful tool because it can help identify potential gaps, help clarify, which ideas belong in which natural groups, and so it's just something to keep in mind as you do any kind of brainstorming or divergent thinking process. So let's use an example. What's wrong with my computer? Is it a hardware problem, a software problem, or a user problem because I'm an idiot? So look at this. Is this a MISI category set or not MISI? Could it be something else besides a hardware problem, a software problem, or user problem? If the answer is yeah, there's a fourth category we didn't think of, then it's not MISI. If something could be both a hardware problem and a software problem, then it's also not MISI. But let's say in my situation, these are the three categories that and a problem can only be one of the three. So it could also be MISI again, depending on the context. What about this question? Who's going to win the next World Cup? Germany, a team from Africa, Morocco, Brazil, a team with very experienced players. Is this a MISI category set or not MISI? Well, I think we can tell right away it's not MISI. Why? Because you see that it's not mutually exclusive. If Morocco wins, then both Morocco, the category, and a team from Africa will be covered by a single answer. So, and maybe Brazil has very experienced players, so it's not mutually exclusive. And there might be a team from Asia, and there's no that's not very experienced, so that this category set would not cover. For example, if Japan won the World Cup. How should Morocco improve public education? Improve teacher quality, better infrastructure, better transportation for rural areas, fire unmotivated teachers, improve extracurricular opportunities. Is this MISI or not MISI? Right? And again, we're going to have to think about our specific context. Is, for example, improving teacher quality, does that include firing unmotivated teachers? In which case, then we'd want to eliminate one of those two categories or try to fuse them together. So when you analyze a category set using MISI, you want to look for opportunities to either reword one of them or maybe merge two together, etc. So imagine we, are sitting as a family and we're planning a holiday in Italy, right? And so this would be an example of an idea clustering exercise. And we each put a bunch of Post-its based on all this different stuff we want to do on our Italian holiday. Now look at these different Post-its, different ideas. How would you cluster them? Do you start seeing that there's some ideas that seem to belong to a similar category, others that belong to a different category? And so maybe you would start kind of saying, you notice, okay, well, we see Sicily here and Trieste here. I wonder if there's a category about places to go. And I see pizza and pasta and gelato. So maybe there's another category involving food, right? So you could try putting them together by, let's say, places, food, and activities, right? And then you would want to look at some of these kind of marginal cases. Sitting on the beach, is that a place or an activity? Well, maybe it's one or the other. Maybe we have to reword sitting on the beach to playing beach volleyball or something like that. So it's more of an activity. Trying the pizza in Naples, and maybe we want to split that into two ideas: one about pizza and one about going to Naples. Right. So this would be ways for you could reword ideas, or maybe reword category sets to make it more mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Okay, so here's just a quick summary of how you want to do a good idea clustering. You want to look at all the ideas. You want to make, either in your mind or on a piece of paper, a first draft. You start noticing some categories, you just kind of write them down. And then you think to yourself, are there any overlaps here? Is there anything missing? Ask your friends and colleagues, who are doing that. This is my first draft. Is there something missing? Is there some overlap? Then you want to pick your names. Names should be good sisters, right? So what I mean by a good sister is the same level of generality, the same number of words. So you don't want a category set that's, places, food, and things we could possibly do, right? You want to change things we could possibly do into activities, the word activities, so that it's roughly the same length as the other names of the categories. You see what I mean? You assign all the ideas and you look at any kind of margin cases or any outliers and see if that helps you maybe refine the words, or maybe there are just some ideas that don't seem to fit into a category. That's also okay. And you want to aim for somewhere between 3 and 7. Some studies suggest that we have more difficulty remembering information once the number is greater than 7 pieces of information, which is one of the hypotheses for why there's most phone numbers in the world include seven digits and not more than that. Each category set is always a draft. So you want to get feedback, and sometimes you'll find, oh gosh, there's these ideas that doesn't fit, or there's only 2 categories, or too many categories, and so you have to be prepared to start over again. Okay, so we want to use this idea of affinity mapping this idea of idea clustering with this method we call affinity mapping, which is a kind of a idea clustering plus sense making prioritization. So this is a method developed by a Japanese anthropologist named Jiro Kawakita in the 1960s, and its purpose was to try to, anthropologists are getting lots and lots and lots of data. How do we structure an unstructured data set using the intelligence of a team or a group? And so it works basically by starting with an individual brainstorm that helps us take maximum amount of intelligence from the group without this kind of anchoring bias problem. Then we group similar ideas together. The idea clustering can happen totally organically by the group, or it can help with have some facilitation. And then we do some sense making. We look at the categories, we explore the relationships, and see what it all means for where our attention should go. A couple of advantages of the method that you're going to see is that by starting with an individual brainstorm, you create greater psychological safety. People are more likely to put disruptive ideas when they don't have to speak them out loud. And people are more likely to be sincere as to what they really think about something, again, if they're noting it to themselves. Once you put the idea on the board, as we're going to see, it no longer, and you don't sign your idea, so the idea becomes the property of the group. And so this kind of depersonalization can reduce potential conflict in the group. The fact that everyone has the right to put their Post-it on the wall and move things around can help equalize power dynamics. Plus, it's super easy and super fast. So it's a great way of getting lots of ideas and information out of people's heads and into a single visual structure. So start with a silent brainstorm with a question. Okay, so what are the biggest problems we need to face in the next 2 years? People write a couple of ideas. The idea is the rule is to only use one Post-it per idea, or only put one idea per Post-it. To write big, ideally in capital letters or majuscule, and not like long sentences, but 3 or 4 words the maximum. The idea is this should be readable. What you're writing on a Post-it should be readable from 3 to 5 meters away. Then once people have written their idea on the Post-it, you can put your Post-it on the wall. And the clustering, I find that you just tell the group, right, as a facilitator, you say, okay, the goal is anyone can put any Post-it anywhere, including other people's Post-its. And what you want to do is to put similar ideas closer together and things that are different further away. And so anyone can move any Post-it anywhere, and the idea is to do this in silence. So again, people are using their independent judgment and not influencing each other. As facilitator, sometimes I will make little encouragements to get the ball rolling, but or moving Post-its or just moving clusters a little further away from each other so that the cluster is easier to see. But it's always best if the group is doing the most of the work itself. And then we step back and look and start discussing, okay, so what do we call these different categories that are emerging? What are the relative size? What are the clusters that seem to have more ideas in them or more areas of concern? Are there any outlier ideas that we should just keep in our minds? And then if you're going to go further in your analysis, you want to think about, okay, are there any categories not represented here? That have we missed some topics that might be potentially interesting? If so, how do we interpret that? And then I think it's fun sometimes to draw links and relationships, especially when you have two clusters that are closely aligned together, or you can kind of reposition the Post-its on the wall. And the goal is at the end to be able to ask the group itself to make sense of it. What is the story that we see here? This is the goal of Affinity. I mean, this whole thing can take about a half an hour, sometimes between 30 and 45 minutes, or even as little as 15 minutes if the group is small. So imagine we're doing this with a team at our annual retreat. We're thinking about the year ahead. We're thinking about what are the problems we really need to pay attention to. And people, write all their ideas down on their Post-its. And here's they are. They start putting their ideas on the wall. Okay, can we see where there might be some clusters where the certain ideas might resemble others? Okay, so let's say that we cluster, we seem to see there are some related to talent and recruitment, some related to social media and marketing, some related to IT, some related to kind of management leadership, some to HR, and then something about meetings. We're not really sure where that should go. And then we step back and we say, okay, so what would we call these categories? And again, you were looking for good sisters, categories that are mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, and have the same number of words roughly. So we could say, okay, young talent, we need young talent. And then there's one related to marketing, and people are calling out different names. And then there's one related to IT, and maybe use a different color for that. One related to leadership, one related to HR. And then you can maybe move the ones related to marketing and HR close to the young talent one because, young talent, this seems to be have more attention from the group. The 6 ideas here opposed to 2 or 3 in the others. What does that mean? Maybe that's what we really need to be focusing on. And it seems to be related potentially to ideas about social media, because we're not reaching the young people we want to attract, or maybe it's related to our HR policies, right? So these are hypotheses. These are ways in which the problem of attracting young talent might connect to these problems of marketing or HR. So you guys see how this affinity mapping situation works. So in our next video, we're going to look at ways to further explore our problem by coming up with better and more complete definitions.